Greetings, podcast listeners. This is Steve. Today's episode is with Brandon Edwards. He's the Director of Security and Emergency Preparedness at JEA. Really an excellent interview, really good insights. And when I started this, I thought this is about security. This is about risk mitigation. And it's a wide variety of topics, right? Everything from electronic intrusions to physical intrusions to storms, etc. But Brandon adds something really special about how using security technologies can also be a critical asset and a service enhancer to the operation. It was very eye-opening for me, and I hope you enjoy this episode as much as I did. Greetings, I'm Steve Vancore, and this is the Florida Public Powercast, a production of the Florida Municipal Electric Association. And this episode is brought to you by Danella Grid and Storm Services. Thank you for sponsoring. Each episode, we sit down with leaders and experts within the Florida public power community, infrastructure, ecosystem, whatever you want to call it. And we try to explore issues, innovations, and the people who are making a difference in municipal utilities. And our guest today is Brandon Edwards. I love his title. He's the Director of Security and Emergency Preparedness at not the Jacksonville Electric Association Authority. It's JEA. It's not JEA. There's no
none of those
anymore.
None of those, Steve.
So there's a reason for that. Tell me that. So they got rebranded, but why is it now JEA and not Jacksonville Electric Authority?
It's actually really interesting, and we deal with this a lot. We get people that do Jacksonville Electrical Authority, but when we took over the city's wastewater systems, is actually when we rebranded ourselves to just JEA.
So in that meeting, somebody was like, "Well, it's going to be called the Jacksonville Electric and Water Utility Authority."
I'm sure they tried.
Raise their hand.
Yeah, I'm sure they tried all different versions of it and just let's just stick with JEA. It's just easier. We don't have to start over. And
it's clean. It's clear.
Yeah, and I've been here for almost 20 years, and to this day, we still have that conversation constantly, where people will spell out our name, but in fact, it is JEA. That's
it's like what we talked about. IBM was International Business Machine.
Right.
No, TECO was Tampa Electric. No, it's the acronym. Let's get on with it. Let's move forward. So how did you come to JEA?
Yeah, so I'm a Marine Corps veteran. Started in the United States Marine Corps in '95. Did my time in the service, really in the security force section of the Marine Corps, and then I became a federal employee. Lived overseas for about 4 years in Naples, Italy, working as a security analyst for the Department of the Navy, and then came to Jacksonville, I think it was 2002, 2003-ish, and worked at the military base here as a physical security officer. An opportunity then came up at JEA, and then just jumped on board. I actually started about 19 years and 8 months as a security analyst for the organization. Actually, I was the first one. That was the first physical security analyst that JEA ever hired. They were
so
trying
I want to ask a
position.
fundamental question. Why does a utility need a security analyst? Why does this, because it sounds to me when you're working in a military operation, obviously security at 30,000 level, reasons to have onboard security at all times, right? Why does a utility need such a position?
It's 2 words, and I actually have gotten that exact question at a grocery store from a lady asked, so why is there security people at a utility? Critical infrastructure. Think about the impact that you can have on secondary sources, law enforcement agencies, hospitals, businesses, stores, if you impact the critical infrastructure. So historically, we have always been a target, an unfortunate target of people that want to do ill things. They realize if they can hit the critical infrastructure, the downstream effect is quite catastrophic to a community. So we're critically important to life, safety, health, wellness of every community that's out there. I mean, if you hit the water, you hit the electric, you can have catastrophic damage.
And that could be from just some jerk wanting to be a disruptor to another country wanting to be. I know, when you read military history, which I try to read some, um, first things, let's take out communications, let's take out electric, let's hamstring their ability to get through their everyday normal lives. If you can't flush your toilets, that may not sound like a big war move, but if you can't flush toilets and people go into them and things start to smell and stink and things get rotten, unsafe, unsanitary, then it makes it easier to overthrow that country,
Well,
right?
absolutely, Steve. I mean, look right now in the global conflicts that we see. Look at what the targets are. I mean, they're hitting power stations, oil and gas stations. They're hitting the critical infrastructure because they know what type of effect it has on that population. We do a new employee orientation here, and one of the stories I always tell, usually it's an opening story of why is this important? Why is security important at a utility company? This has always been important in that medieval times. I use this as kind of as an example. Back in ancient medieval times, if they had a castle and they couldn't sack the castle, they couldn't figure out how to get them to open the gates, they would dump rats into the water supply that was going into the castle because they knew eventually, without fresh water, you're going to have to open the door. And that's all they needed them to do. So critical infrastructure just historically has been a target. It's unfortunate, but we're aware of it. And utilities, as the security and threat landscape just keeps getting more challenging, I mean, we recognize it, and people are investing properly to make sure that your critical resources are protected.
It reminds me of when I was getting certified to scuba dive, and they said, scuba diving is relatively easy until it's not, and then the failure is catastrophic.
Yeah.
And it sounds to me like, today we're taping this on a Wednesday morning. There's probably not an imminent threat. There's probably nothing going on that's, immediate and dangerous. But your job is to make sure, someone's on that wall at all times
Mhm.
to make sure it's. How do you keep sharp on that? And I guess from your experience in the Marines, drilling, practices, tabletop exercises, but how do you keep your team sharp to make sure we don't become complacent, right? I also think about that old adage about flying an airplane. It's endless hours of boredom interspersed by brief moments of sheer
Yeah.
terror. So how do you keep your team sharp?
So, a lot of training, a lot of education, a lot of exercises. We are very aware of what's going on in our local community as well as the national stage. I think people will be pleasantly surprised to find out that there's a lot of supporting organizations that help us. Whether it's on the national DHS stage or we have really close partnerships with our law enforcement partners on the state and federal level. So my team is constantly engaged with various intelligence sources. So we are aware of the tools and tactics that the opponent might be using, and we make sure that we're preparing our organization accordingly.
So I see your title is Director of Security and Emergency Preparedness, and as you're talking, I'm thinking there's two threats that could
Yeah.
hamper, impede this critical infrastructure. One could be, we just use the word, a terrorist attack, or just some lunatic decides they want to just disrupt everything. But also, you can be attacked by Category 5 storm.
Natural disasters. Yeah.
So how does that intersect in your role? Tell me a little bit about, because on one part it's security from, I trust adverse people coming in wanting to do damage, but it's also the mindlessness of a hurricane, a tornado, a flood, a wind event. How do you blend those two?
Yeah. So actually, what you might be surprised is my division. So I have 5 different divisions, believe it or not, at JEA that report to me some of them aren't even in the title. So we have operational security, physical security, I have identity and access management, emergency preparedness, and public records. So part of my mission is all about access, right? It's all about access to facilities, access to information, access to records. So helping control that access. But what you might not know is security and emergency management or emergency preparedness being connected is actually quite common in our industry. There's a lot of them out there where the security director wears those two major roles. And the reason for that is when you think about security, you think about monitoring for events, you think about responding to incidents that occur, and you think about it's happened, now I have to notify people. Well, emergency preparedness is I'm planning for that incident to evolve into something bigger, right? Something that's more impactful to the whole organization. How do I plan for that? How do I document my plan? How do I exercise that plan? So it's a natural transition from this incident has occurred. The security people are working on it. It's now evolved into something larger. So there's a handoff because my group actually also manages the Emergency Operations Center. So there's a handoff to the emergency operations team who stand up the incident management team across the company. And then they take that initial incident that has evolved into an event and then manage it throughout its life cycle.
So if power is down,
sure,
at that stage, it's about communicating with the public. It's about just deploying the resources to get the power back up. It's about all those things, irrespective of
what
why the
caused it.
power is down.
Absolutely.
And so that's where the convergence occurs. So, and I think it also makes sense because, it's an external threat to the operations and the infrastructure, right?
I mean, it's the same as in cybersecurity. So if you have an incident that occurs in the cyberspace, there are teams that are actively working on the incident, right? They're dealing with what the impact is of the incident. Now, there's the emergency preparedness side or the incident management team. What's now the impact on the business and our services and our operation and our community? They're answering the bigger questions, right? They're managing the bigger event that has occurred because of the incident. So
is
having them in the same group
also is cybersecurity, because when I hear security, I mean, you thought somebody drives a truck into a power plant or something, or a storm. But is your department also handle cyber attacks?
So at JEA, it's in two different locations. So we have an information security department that's under technology services. I handle the access management part of it. So like your user life cycle, your user ID that you're issued, what you have access to, which is a component of cybersecurity, but it's in a separate department. And some of that is because of span of control and making sure that the people who are the administrators within our own systems can't just arbitrarily grant themselves access. There's an outside source that internally monitors for that to make sure that insider risk is also properly managed. So you don't have a systems administrator granting themselves, causing regulatory violations because they didn't know a certain rule that was happening. There's another group that reports through a whole different chain of command that's keeping an eye on that activity.
I remember going to a seminar on cybersecurity, and it never left me that it's 9 times out of 10 or more, it's not a hardware problem. 9 times out of 10, it's not a software problem. 9 times out of 10, it is a people problem.
It is a user
peopleware. That somebody, after years and years of training, still opens up a phishing email, even if it made it through the security system, whatever. Or they log onto a website and then download something, and it's like game over, and it's just human stupidity.
Yeah, we have a phenomenal team that monitors for that type of activity. My team is more on the account side. So when we're talking about access, so you come to JEA, my team helps set up your user profile, what you have access to, when you log in, what type of resources are granted to or provisioned to your account. But they also monitor for why do you have that? Like, where did that come from? So, and then they get the alerts and such to address that.
So you've been doing this 20 years. Well, you've been doing
a little longer.
What's that?
A little bit longer. Yeah.
For JEA, right?
Yeah.
For JEA. Which sounds like a kombucha drink, right? Hey,
I don't know what that is.
Let's go share some JEA. What's changed? I want to ask you 2 parts. What's changed since you've been there working on this? And then I want you to look ahead a little bit as to what do you see on the horizon? And obviously AI, it will have to probably be a part of that. But what's changed in your 20 years?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when I started, like I alluded to, I was the first security analyst that JA hired. They had a manager of security at the time that reported under the facilities group. And security during that time was treated like any other building component. You'd have your plumbing, you have your HVAC system, you have your security. It's a very isolated component that doesn't really connect to a lot of things. It's an overhead charge that is the cost of building the building. You would buy cameras, they're independent, they're on their own little network, their own little system, and had no integration at all. That has completely changed over the last years. Well, one, because the organization that we've already talked about recognized how critical security is to protecting a community, right? That life-sustaining resources that we talked about. But 2, we went from analog to digital. Everything moved into the networking world, where now the IP camera world, where now instead of using these isolated digital video recorders who were just fancy VCRs, we're actually using servers and PCs and things of this nature. So it expanded. So the same cabling, the same power that was being used for your computer is now what I'm using for my cameras. So there's a
Yeah, it used to be
convergence.
closed circuit TV, right?
Yep.
And yeah, like you said, you had the VHS and it
Now,
overrode
now
and it
it's
was really
network
poor
video.
quality.
Everything's network. You pull multiple network cables, so one for the camera and one for the PC. But everything's integrated. So now the people that you would hire, the guards and the gates and all that stuff, I need software technicians. I need analysts who know how to work a server. Need people who have that type of expertise. It's a completely different environment. The systems are highly integrated with not only the network environment, but with business systems. They can be connected to the building automation.
It
These are
reminds me of
things.
when I was in college in the 1980s, every bar you went into had two or three burly guys standing out front, right?
Yeah,
Big chested guys standing there checking your ID. That was the bouncer, the physical bouncer. I guess when you started, you had the physical bouncers. Now it just has a sign that says, "Smile, you're on camera."
right.
and we have
100%.
and we're reading about like Ebor and places have facial recognition AI to determine if you've got a record. You better put a hat down and put a mask on because you're going to get recognized. So you're saying the biggest transition has been from a physical to electronic, and I guess also once you digitize the system, that data flows back and forth, and so that probably adds a lot to the cybersecurity stuff.
New regulations, new regulatory requirements. Now there's sensitive data in areas where it didn't exist before. When I say that, I'm saying like on servers and computers. There's a lot of devices that have access to things where before it was a closed circuit system. You had to go to this PC in the corner, and that was the only one that had a monitor that was connected to the cameras. But now it's connected, globally. There's cloud computing out there now. So the environment itself has just dramatically changed to where it's more accessible, it's more open, it can be cheaper in some aspects. But you're dealing with things whereas in the past, I could hire a guard to do certain things. Now I need a systems engineer to manage the radar system that we're now employing to protect the asset, or the thermal software that we're using, on our camera system, or advanced analytics. These are all high tech, high speed things that are out there to supplement the security program. And we've had no choice, right? And we've had to evolve as the threats are evolving, because the bad guys haven't stopped. They're evolving their techniques and tactics, right? They're finding new ways to be creative and exploit vulnerabilities.
Brandon, you're like a character out of a Tom Clancy novel.
Am I?
I mean, yeah, with all this.
I love Jack Carr, by the way. If you want to know. Love Jack Carr.
And I love Jack Ryan, although the new movie was not very good. This is the FMEA podcast and
Right.
movie review. But this is fascinating, because what you're telling me is we went from physical protection of infrastructure, now electronic, both incoming and outgoing. And I love the analogy. Instead of hiring more guards at the guard gate, you're hiring more systems analysts to interpret. I mean, you just opened my brain. Infrared cameras, I guess that makes sense. So if somebody's trying to sneak in at night. And I know, am I being like too much TV saying somebody's
No. It's real.
putting a bomb on something? That's exactly what you're fighting
against?
It's
real. It's analytics. It's smart cameras that can detect things, that can look for items. We can insert in our search engine, look for a certain vehicle of a certain type, and the cameras will bring it up and show you some options to investigate. You still need the people, right? You still need the analysts at the computer making the decision, is this a threat or not?
Right.
But the difference is he has so much more resources than we've ever had before to monitor things, to do those detections, than the guard that was at a guard check at a front gate, right? It is dramatically different.
I'm reminded of that old joke, and somebody says, so what's that hat you're wearing? And they say, well, it keeps lions away. And the other person says, well, there's no lions around here. And he says, exactly. The hat's working. But when I first hear, listen, I'm just a regular guy. I'm just a regular citizen. I hear security systems at a utility plant. Why do they need that? They've not had any accidents. And Brandon Edwards says to me, exactly.
Right.
Because we've been keeping them from happening. I find this fascinating. So, but what kind of emerging security concerns do you have? You wake up today. What is the thing you're worried about today that's an
Oh,
emergency
I
security?
almost don't even want to talk about it on a podcast, but I think all of us in our industry are very, very concerned about drones. I mean, drones are the hot topic. That's what we've been concerned about for at least the last few years. Even more so with the global conflicts, we're seeing what I'm calling the socialization of the weaponization of drones.
Yeah.
You see that you see them, and it's become almost, I don't want to say popular, but it's every other video clip is they're using a drone and they're showing how it's done, knowing that we're a target, and they're actually using those devices against critical infrastructure in those areas. So it's just informing a bad actor of, hey, maybe this is possible. So we're very, very concerned about that type of stuff, and the monitoring, the mitigation measures. We're still trying to catch up and try to make sure we've got the right technology to detect a threat, and not only detect it, but to be able to hopefully mitigate it and then respond to it if we have to. And it's a real challenge. So going back to what we just talked about of how it's evolved, it used to be I've got to worry about my fences and I got to worry about my property line and who's
Yeah.
coming and going. Now I got to look up and I got to worry about everything up there. And it's a tiny, tiny object that's 400 plus feet in the air that I've got to try to figure out how
That
to
can move
mitigate.
rapidly and quickly
Oh,
and deposit something evil right into the middle of your infrastructure.
100%. It is a real concern. It's an evolving concern. I mean, in Florida, we're lucky. I mean, there's the Unmanned Aircraft Systems Act in the Florida statute that makes it I think it's a third degree felony if you interfere with critical infrastructure, right? Using a drone. So we've got some legislative support, but the problem is that doesn't stop it from happening, right? We still have to figure out that they're coming and that we've
Has this
detected them.
anywhere in America happened? I mean, is somebody like in Omaha, Nebraska, or Topeka, Kansas?
We've had several cases of almost, right? We've had a lot of almost cases where it's happened. We've had some cases, and I can't think specifically what state it was in, but we've had cases where they've used drones and attached objects to and run them across transmission lines to cause a short. So it is real. And the more it gets developed and the more people see success stories in global conflicts, the more likely they're to try it here.
But here's what I worry about, Brandon, is the standard metaphor is there's an intersection, and everybody who lives in the neighborhood knows it's a dangerous intersection. And it's not until somebody gets killed do they repair the intersection.
Yeah.
Doing what you do has to cost a lot of money, not just attention, not just tabletop exercise, not just exceptional training, but buying new software, buying new technologies, buying anti-drone technologies, all those things. And it feels to me like, in the municipal utility space, security departments are often limited in their funds and personnel. And my sense is if we had an attack, then suddenly people would go, we need to give them the proper money. How do you manage that day in, day out with limited resources?
A good question. And in some cases, I think it's even a collateral duty. Some of these utilities are so small that they're really challenged keeping up with what that threat landscape looks like. I think the first thing I would recommend, or at least what we've been successful here at JEA doing, is recognizing, first off, we're not a security company, right? I'm not Allied Universal. We are JEA, who's a municipal utility in Northeast Florida. So
you have a primary thing you're supposed to be doing, right?
I have mission essential functions to provide electric, water, and wastewater to our ratepayers. It's a cultural change in the security mindset to shift from being an overhead cost to a business enabler. So, and it's on the security people, it's on the security professionals to recognize this, right? You're not an overhead cost. How do you become a business enabler, right? How do I bring
you have to
value?
explain the difference to me. Explain.
Yeah, I got you. So, like we were talking about before, when I'm buying systems for a building, I'm buying the plumbing, I'm buying the HVAC, I buy the security, right? I buy the cameras that go on the building. I'm an overhead. I got to have a guard. The difference is recognizing how I bring value to the various business sectors of my organization. So JEA has mission essential functions that we're trying to do. Okay. How can the security department bring value to my organization, right? How can I support the mission essential functions? And really what it comes down to is we're talking enterprise risk. The organization has a series of risks that we're concerned with. Every business that is in our organization, every sector, water, wastewater, electric. They all have their enterprise level risks that they're concerned of. So
Right.
how can security demonstrate to them that I'm of value to you, right? I can help mitigate the risks that you're concerned. I can do cost savings. I can be just collateral. I can help you with some of your operations and maintenance tasks. So a lot of times what we'll do when I'm out there getting that camera system for a substation, let's say, is I'll meet with operations, or my team will sit down with them and go, hey, we're putting in a few cameras. Where could I put a camera that might help you? Well, absolutely. If you could put a camera here and here that watches these things, we wouldn't have to send out a person to do the repair. We could just look at it.
So you have to show, I love this because when I saw this as risk mitigation, right?
Yep.
Your job is to prevent bad shit from happening, right?
Right.
That's your primary job, whether it's from a storm, a tornado, a flood, an earthquake, which apparently we now have in Florida, to an attack, whether it's a physical attack, a cyber attack, or a drone attack. But your role, and I love this about your experience, is that you're saying, I can also be a value add.
Right.
Not just, hey, I got to protect these assets. I can improve these assets. And you gave a really good, I love that, by the way, a really good example of, hey, I can put this camera, I put an extra camera out there, and I'm going to make something up. It'll show this valve. So if that valve's leaking, you don't have to send somebody out to see it. You can see it on the camera, and you don't have to send staff, personnel, drive time, downtime, et cetera, out to view that. So now I see you when I'm looking at my budget. I don't just see you as, oh, here comes Brandon. He's going to make me spend money on security. Instead, you can say it's on security to protect your asset, but also we can make your job more efficient and better.
So, Steve, we're actually asked for a lot of times because of the resource that what a lot of people don't realize is there's so many tools that we have, even the card readers at the gates that help track login times or who's in the substation working. So for safety, we know who's there. They can just look at it on the screen and see who's coming in and out of the substation. But they're using security equipment to do that. Is we're leveraging our technology as a important resource on a safety and operational perspective to these business sectors. So they culturally become used to using us for that. So when they're building out their projects that we're also at the table with when they're designing, let's add these in here because it's really handy to have that. I get the security benefit, they get the operational benefit.
So for example, on the cue cards, it's great for HR to know who was coming and who was going and who's saying, oh, I worked all day Tuesday. No, you didn't. You didn't swipe in.
So I actually talk in my team. I think they're probably annoyed with me saying this. I always say, where's the value? How do we provide value? I don't want to be an overhead cost. I want my CEO and my CAO to look at me and say, okay, you are an important part of everything we do in the mission essential functions, not just for security, which is a critical component of it, but look at all the other things that you're providing to the organization from your group. But what I promote to my team a lot of time is you need to culturally learn what's important to your audience and have a 30-second elevator speech ready to go. If you find yourself with a chief in an elevator and they ask you, hey, what's going on in the security world? The CFO doesn't care that he just bought a cool new camera for one of the substations, but the CFO might care that, we just finished this security project and it's going to save us $2 million on operational costs because we can use the technology instead of having to put people out there.
That is so eye-opening because, and let's go back to you saying like 20 years ago, right? It was about physicality.
Yeah.
It was about armed guards at the gate. It's about a gate that opens and closes. It's about all these physical elements, which can only be that. Right? You're not going to have a guard at the guard gate and say, hey, we also want you to do some data entry on your downtime. But now what you're saying is these technologies are not just improving security, but they're adding value to different parts of the operations of JEA.
Yeah, years ago.
How did this come about? I mean, was this your idea? Is this like
no? I'm not going to take credit for this. No, I won't. Long time ago, I was at a conference and I'm in the class, and it was actually a marketing professional that was given a presentation. This was ASIS is our big global security organization. We were at one of their big conferences that they were having, and the marketing professional was talking about you don't speak the right language. Security executives, security professionals, you do not speak the right language that your executives speak. And it's on you, not them, to figure out how to communicate with them correctly. They don't care about the same things you care about. So it's your job, not theirs, to figure out what they value, what's important, what risks they're concerned with, and then how can you contribute to their mission. And that was, for me, that was like, wow, we have historically been doing this the wrong way. I mean, we were doing the right things. We're putting in the guards, we're putting in the cameras, we're doing the patrols, we're doing all these things. But that doesn't mean anything to the chief human resources officer. That they've got their own risk and concerns that they're worried about how many people are at this particular location during the day. Or you've got the CFO, how much am I spending on these different things? How can I save some money? That's where we have to learn how to communicate. We need to learn how to convert what we do every day into the right language, so then it translates well to them at their desk that, oh, security helps me with this. They help me address these risks and concerns that I have. That was, for me, that was eye-opening.
And I love what you said. We used to be seen as, oh, here comes another expense, right? Yeah. Brandon's walking in the door. He's going to cost us money because he's going to.
Oh, I've had that exact conversation.
Right. But now what you're saying is you're being invited to the meetings.
Yeah.
That had to be a big boy moment for you. You're like, dude, I got invited to an operations meeting. They finally see the value of what we do.
You know, my if you want to call it a big boy moment, really had nothing to do with the executives. But one of my biggest successes that I felt was we were launching a bunch of camera systems and substations, right? We're putting cameras everywhere. And we were trying to get operations to understand that you can use this too. It's okay. We'll let you use these cameras. You can find out what tripped that circuit breaker, that it was a squirrel, right? I mean, you can do whatever it happens to be. And I remember I was an analyst at the time, bringing the camera system in, and they didn't want anything to do with it. So I set it at the corner of the desk, right? And I said, hey, we're going to set you up with an account. You use your account, you log in. If you want, I can show you. No, we'll never use that thing. It'll gather dust. And I think it was probably 2 months later, I get an email. Can we add a few more cameras? We got a few more spots we'd like to see. And then now I'm looking on the screen, like, they're on this thing every day. They're checking. Hey, I've got to send a crew out. I've got to trip a breaker. Let me make sure the substation's clear. I'll pull up the cameras and look around. Or, hey, what just happened out here? Let me pull up the cameras. I'll see what's happening. So they realized that the ease that it brought to their operational duties by just leveraging stuff you were buying anyway. You're already going to buy the cameras for security. Let's figure out how to use it for other things.
You know, a book that I read when I was working on my master's called The Third Wave by Alvin Toffler talked about the third wave being the information age. Yeah. That it's the first time we went from ag, we went to industry to information, that information is the one commodity. So like if I grow corn and I give you an ear of corn, I have one less ear of corn, right? It's a commodity I gave away, but information is a commodity that if I give you information, I still have that information. Now you also have that information and it compounds upon itself. It sounds to me exactly like something that Alvin Toffler would have predicted and would have called and said, this is exactly a good use. That camera installed for security also can be used for HR management, can be used for repair management, can be used for operational management. Now that they know it was a squirrel that tripped that circuit, they can go out there and harvest the squirrel or move the nest or put a screen around it or something like that. And now it becomes an operational asset, not a cost. And I look at it like insurance, right? When I first started this interview, I thought of you like my insurance company. You protect me against bad stuff happening. So, or when bad stuff happens, you come to bear. But what you're saying is we're also enhancing and providing assets to the rest of the operations.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. It's well stated. You're going to want to invest anyway to protect your critical assets. Why not leverage all the other uses that you can get out of this? What a lot of people don't realize, and my team, we're actually promote this quite often, is we are such a data warehouse. We have so much data that comes into whether it's alarm information that happens at sites, whether it's camera video, whether it's think about the access control system with the badge readers and the card swipes, and all that data every day just pouring into our department. How can I use this to provide value to JEA, specifically to this electric group, to this water group that has a particular problem they're trying to solve? How can I leverage all this data that I have to benefit them?
Okay, so I'm a fellow utility operator. I'm in security as well, and I'm listening to what you're saying, and I'm loving this, right? But let's talk about structure of your organization, because you deal with everything from water, wastewater, electric, chill water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. How do you structure your department to handle this incredible diversity of assets that you're charged to protect?
Yeah. Limited funds, limited resources. I mean, we all have that problem. There's a saying that we have in our industry, and I did not make this either, so I don't want credit for it. Treat your diamonds like diamonds and treat your pencils like pencils. In the past, security professionals would just treat everything the same. And that's not the correct way to approach asset identification, right? So what we do, at least at JEA, it's all about building the same partnerships that we've just built with operations. We actually bring them in, periodically throughout the year. We sit down and we say, okay, tell me what's important to you. You've built this plant, you've built this substation. Tell me what's important to you. What asset is important? Where's your diamond on this plant? That if you lose this diamond, it's catastrophic. But this is a pencil. I don't need to spend as much money on protecting this. I can spend more money on this. The key being, we're not the driver. We don't make that decision. Operations does. They inform us of what assets are important and what are less important per se. And they look at it here at JA, we look at it from three different lenses. There's the operational impact, right? Like what happens to JEA if this magically disappeared? If aliens beam this object out of here, what would happen to our mission essential functions for the community? What happens to the community if this disappears? Sometimes it's not even about us. It's about if you lose this asset, the hospital next door goes down. They can only sustain generation power for X number of hours. It's going to take us this long to get that asset back in. So they're going to have a real problem. Or maybe it's the only water treatment plant that serves a particular part of town. If it goes out, we're going to have to truck in water to this location. This is going to be a serious issue. So it's the community impact. And last and definitely not least is the regulatory impact. There are some things that if it goes down at all, there could be fines and penalties and environmental impacts, sanitary sewer overflows that might happen because a pump station has lost power and it's in a critical, very environmentally sensitive area. So we present them with these three different types of impacts and we talk about what each of them are and they have their list of assets and locations and then they rank them. They tell us.
So your structure is like almost like the bottom up versus top down. Because what I would have anticipated was chief security guy, comes in, is like, let me tell you guys how to be. What you're saying is, A, we got to show asset valuation. We have to show extra value to them. And B, communication through cooperation saying, hey, what is it you're protecting? What is it you need? Let us put a plan together for you. And I love it because once I tell you, hey, Brandon, this flux capacitor over here is my most important asset. And you're going to say, okay, I'm going to put the resources towards that asset that's necessary. Right. If this is your least important asset, then when you guys can deal with that internally or whatever. I mean, am I getting that right? That's how you're.
No, 100%. You're right on board. And I hope you see the thread that kind of runs through all of the cultural change that it creates. Is now you're a partner with me at the table. You are telling me what you're worried about. I'm going to provide resources to help you feel better, to help address the risks that you have. You are now going to be more invested in my program because you were part of that solution making when we sat at the table.
If somebody had said to me, you're going to interview a former Marine who's the head of security, I got to be honest with you, and I've been honest this whole time. But
I was just about to ask what you were lying about.
But to be frank, this is not what I would have expected. And what I love about this interview, because it's so eye-opening, it so says, guys, it's not about being a tough guy. It's about being cooperative and about showing value to the programs you bring. And it's not just about risk mitigation, right? It's about enhancement and improving service.
It's about operational excellence. It's about demonstrating value. It's about being part of a team, right? I think you'd be, I hope you wouldn't be surprised, but that mentality in our industry has really gone to the wayside. Most of the security professionals, the directors from various utilities that I deal with, from other, not even utilities, but from hospitals and things here in the Jacksonville area specifically, they have the same mindset. Because I can't be successful if I don't have the support of my leadership. Who pays my bill? It's not the security department. I don't generate money. The operations group does. I'm here to serve operations. That's what my role is. They are my customer, and I need to make sure I protect their assets. And that perspective really has helped our program blossom here at JEA.
I mean, proof is in the pudding. There have been no lions.
Jinx it. Let's not jinx it.
Okay, knocking on wood here. Good stuff. Last thought, last question. And by the way, thank you for staying on so long. I told you it would be about 35 to 40 minutes. We're running over time, but I'm just completely fascinated by this, Brandon. What extra steps are you taking moving forward for hurricane season?
So we actually, extra steps is probably a misnomer because we prepare for hurricane season all year long. We never stop preparing. All year at JEA, whether it's tree trimming, making sure we have the right materials on hand, making sure our people are trained and educated. One of the initiatives I think we're pushing this year, if you want to just kind of highlight something that we're really focusing a little more on, is third string. Right? You got your first string and your second string. Who's your third string? Right? Who's the person that you're preparing to take a leadership role in your incident management team when a hurricane comes? Unfortunately, I mean, some of these go for a very long period of time, and people can only work effectively for so many hours. And we spend a lot of time with the primary and backup, but who's that third person? Let's get them involved. Let's get them in exercise. Let's get them in meetings. So they're learning the role that they're going to take in the future if we were, unfortunately, to be activated for an emergency.
No, I remember on a different podcast about emergency management and talking about how there are departments that have nothing to do during a storm. And one example was Parks and Rec, right?
Yeah.
It's obviously protecting assets, whatever, but the guys mowing the lawns are stopping during a storm, right?
Right.
Et cetera. But repurposing those Parks and Recs people to say, okay, your job is to line up housing for mutual aid workers coming in. And now, to your point about third string, the parks director, who maybe oversees that now, has an assistant or two that would help with that, but training that assistant or two who might be the next park director. And to already get that training underneath. I love that concept, but it also speaks well of JEA that you're not dealing about who's going to be first up, you're dealing about who's going to be third up, which tells me first and second, you've done the necessary legwork, groundwork, training, and all that stuff to make sure you're operational.
I mean, we follow the National Incident Management System, the NIM system, the Incident Management Team, ICS structure. I'm sure you've heard all this before. And we push really hard throughout the year to make sure everybody on that team is well trained, well educated, and hopefully has, well, I don't know if it's hopeful or not, but we want experience. We just don't want to have to go through the incident to get the experience that you have to do. But it's really important to us to be prepared at all times.
No, and it's I use a circle again, but it's paying your insurance bill every month.
Yeah.
You hate paying it. But you also hope you never have to use it.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly right.
And that's, you're the guy, Brandon, that, you've transitioned it from, we hope we never have to use you. So, hey, we need Brandon in this meeting because he's going to get us some cameras that we can do and improve our operational efficiencies.
Absolutely. That's the goal.
Man, this was really an excellent podcast. And you're a first timer.
I am. I've never been on a podcast before. This was terrifying.
And neither have I. So that makes two of us. That's awesome. Brandon, I learned so much today. Thank you so much. This has really been helpful. And I know your colleagues will feel the same way.
Excellent. I'm glad I could help.
Thank you very much. Folks, this is Steve Vancore, and you've been listening to the Florida Public Powercast, sponsored by Danella Grid and Storm Services and brought to you by the Florida Municipal Electric Association, your statewide voice for public power. Thank you so much for joining us.